Hey guys, it's Jason from IMG Filmworks. Welcome back to my channel in part 3 of episode 9 of Building a Budget Beast, the vlog series where I walk you through everything I do to my turbocharged Honda Accord. In this part, we're going to finish the installation. We're going to put everything back. In part 1, we deconstructed everything. In part 2, I talked about the considerations that I looked at before I turbocharged my car. And finally, in this part, we're putting everything back together. So let's get started. The first step in the installation process is to secure the turbo manifold to your head. If your turbo manifold came with longer studs, as you can see here in this photo, then simply unscrew the studs from your head and then reinstall the supplied studs. Once you do that, take the gasket and put them over the studs, as you can see. Next, install the turbo manifold over the new studs and secure them with the 8 nuts you either removed or that were supplied with the manifold. All right guys, so here we are at the front of the car, and some of you guys might think that the steps are just the reverse, but I'm going to change it up a little bit. So in the very end of the deconstruction, we removed the turbocharger. Now I'm not going to put that in first because if you look down here, let's see if I can get a light. There's limited space, and it doesn't really look like it now, but when you put this turbocharger on here, I mean, this whole thing is completely filled up. And with this right here, the block, it makes the down tube very difficult to get on. It's probably actually impossible to get it on with the dump pipe on there as well. And I don't want to take the dump pipe off. So what we're going to do is I'm going to fish the down tube up through here first, loosely attach it to the catalytic converter and exhaust system, and then hang it here if we need. And that way it'll be much easier to mate it up to the turbocharger. So that's step 1. Let's go ahead and get the down tube on. All right, so you guys can see how much room there is as long as the turbocharger's not in there. So let's go ahead and fish this pipe back up through there. It's going to be difficult even without the turbocharger. Where are my exhaust bolts? What are you doing with my exhaust bolts? Let me have those. Okay guys, this is where bagging and tagging really helps you out on little parts like this. Even though I'm going to replace these, if you weren't replacing them, it's really good to keep track of them. So let's go ahead and just temporarily put these on and hold it up until I can get it secured up top. This way it's secured down here and won't come out when I'm trying to get it on the turbo up top. Okay, so now what you can see is we've got it connected down to the exhaust, and this is in here right there, but it allows us to move it around a little bit, so we'll be able to easily maneuver it onto the turbo. Well, I don't know about easily, but that's why I'm doing it that way. So next, let's get the turbo and get it put on. So not only does the hot side of the turbo need to be connected back to this down tube, we also need to connect it to the turbo manifold, and on the compressor side of the turbo, we have to put it back into this intercooler piping here. Okay, so here we are at the bench right before we're getting ready to put the turbocharger back on, and we've got the new down tube to the turbine side of the turbocharger gasket. We've also got the T3-4 gasket, and then we've got a new wastegate gasket as well. So let's go ahead and get these on. All right, so I'm gonna kind of liberally apply some alcohol-based cleaner there so the turbo will hopefully slide. And one other consideration is this oil line. We're probably going to have to put it on before we get everything in the way we had to take it out, because that was a problem getting it out. So I'm going to leave it covered for right now just to see where I'm at until I can get it down in here a little closer. It's difficult to get the right angle here hope you guys can see that. To get this drain pipe back on. There we go. You don't want to go too tight because these are aluminum fittings and you could strip them. So this is why you want to leave it very loosely tied to the catalytic converter system. So we can actually move this. So you can actually move this pipe up out of the way if you need, so you've got room to put the bolts on, the nuts on the studs and everything else. So let's go ahead and put some nuts on. Dead. Zeke, is there any mosquitoes on you? Go back and make sure all the T3-4 manifold bolts are nice and tight. All right, next, I'm going to install the wastegate. Okay, the next step is installing the dump pipe here onto the wastegate with the new gasket, so let's go ahead and do that now. Next is to take this beautiful valve cover now and put the new gasket in it and get it back on the car. So these gaskets only go one way. And you can tell because the cam opening here is much larger than this cam opening. Okay, and the only place that RTV is required according to the manual is on the 4 flat spots here on the side of the cam opening. So we're just going to put a little bit of high temp red RTV and then we'll be ready to go in. But before we do that, let's go ahead and get the new grommets all back in. Okay, so here's our new OEM spark plug tube grommets and different things. So we are going to do my little Windex trick again, and we're just going to spray a little bit of Windex on this because it'll make it much easier to seat. Next, I'm going to put the PCB grommet back in. And the last thing we want to do is transfer these new bolt washers that fit and actually hold the valve cover in place. We want to transfer these new ones to the old bolts. So I've already done this one. I'll show you how we do it. Okay, so what you need to do is you have to remove the top of this washer from the rubber piece. So just be very careful and get it apart like this. And then once it's apart, you can run your screwdriver right through it and get it up over that lip on the bolt. And then it comes off, and once that's off, you can get the other piece off. And then we can put this one on, and basically to put this one on, you just punch it through, and it'll give and come through. We're going to use a little bit of Windex, the Windex trick again. So hope it slide a little bit. And I found using a vise really helps here. Just like that. All right, 2 down, 3 to go. Okay, so once the gasket's installed, we apply RTV sealant to the 4 flat areas on the cam arches. I've already done it to this side. Let's do it to this side. Okay, so we've applied the RTV to the 4 flat corners. We're going to let this sit just a few minutes to harden up and then stick it in the car. The service manual says not to allow it more than 10 minutes before installing it. So let's go over to the car and get it prepped and ready for the valve cover to go back on. Okay, so here we are at the car, and let's go ahead and remove the foil here that I've had for the last couple of days while I've been doing this turbo deconstruction and install. And we are just simply going to put this back on and bolt it down and tighten it to spec. So let's get the PCV valve out of the way. And we're ready to go in. Now, this surface here all along has been cleaned several times to the best of my ability, and make sure that's clean. You don't want like any standing oil on it because that could cause a problem with the seal. So let's give this a couple more minutes and we'll bring it over here and stick it on and see how it looks. Okay, you got to be careful inside here and get these things to seat. There we go. Okay, so we've got it on. Let's go ahead and put the bolts in, and it gets torqued down to 86 inch-pounds, which equates to about 7 foot-pounds of torque. And when we torque these down, we're going to kind of go in a crisscross pattern. That one's at 86. Okay, let's put the PCV valve back in. You should hear a very satisfying click, just like that. Put it back in the wire keeper. Okay, so we've got the plugs, wires, valve cover, everything back installed. And you know, it looks so fantastic, but you can really see from the valve cover leaking everywhere, we've got a lot of residual oil. So this engine's definitely going to need a detail to bring it up to the level that valve cover looks like. So stay tuned for that video. All right, so now that we got the valve cover and everything installed, we can go ahead and install the feed line on the turbo. Now I went ahead and put some new thread sealant on there, so let's go ahead and get this installed. Next, we want to replace the breather. Don't want to damage the paint here, so be careful doing that. The last thing to do is make sure that all the vacuum lines, if you removed any, are hooked back up. We removed this vacuum line from the wastegate, and you can see I've already put it back in over here. But that brings me to a viewer requested for me to show how I hooked up my vacuum lines. So let me go ahead and show that at this point. So the wastegate is hooked in the same place that the blow-off valve is, and it runs down just to one of the vacuum ports right off the intake manifold. Also on this line, I have my boost gauge running here. You can see it. So there's three things on that. The next is the vacuum line that controls the cruise control, I believe, and it comes off here, and I have that running my fuel pressure regulator. And the FMU was hooked in right here, which is just another line off of another port. So I had that hooked up originally on its own line. All right, guys, that's it for part 3 of this multi-part episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up so I know. Also, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed so you don't miss any of the stuff I have planned in 2018. And until next time, as always, I'll see you right back here inside my garage.